Oh, item 13, the draft submission on the Ministry for Environment's draft waste strategy. And welcome, Ruth. Thank you. I'll just pull it up.
Thank you very much. You'll notice that unfortunately Ross Trotter and Rowan Latham from the Resource Recovery team aren't here to answer your questions on technical matters. So, but I hope that I can provide some policy input anyway.
Yeah, are you going to run through a presentation or introduce it, or do you just?
I'll just speak to it if I may.
Yeah, it's a very good submission, I think. But yeah, you speak to it.
No, thank you. And councillors will be aware that you also had a workshop earlier in the piece, a briefing in which we invited, the staff invited input, and together put together this draft submission. I guess the main points that I wish to make is that there's strong support for the underlying principles and overall direction of this strategy and issues and options for new legislation. In particular, we consider that we can and must do better in moving towards a low waste circular economy, and that we consider the enactment of comprehensive waste legislation and development of a new strategy are critical first steps. So I think one of the key themes of the submission is that we are looking to get it to having a much stronger basis for moving forward. If the council has produced its own, as you know, waste management and minimisation plan, but clearly we need the leadership in the form of legislation and a comprehensive strategy and action plan from central government if we're going to achieve our goals in terms of waste minimisation. And the submission, as you'll see, goes through the questions asked one by one pretty well. Most of them we give a response to, not all of them. I'd also like to point out that the submission is very much aligned with the mayoral forum submission, which I'm sure you will have seen. And while it emphasises certain aspects perhaps and takes certain views, it is very much aligned with the mayoral forum submission and with our partners, territorial authorities and the regional council generally. Really, it's I think Canterbury is fortunate in having such good alignment within the region.
Yes, because great minds think alike.
Indeed.
Yes. Because I like the title of this, that MV's titled it, Taking Responsibility for Our Waste. And it is about that, and a lot of it is around education as well. And when you talk about the roles, the different roles, I think number 19 there on page 80 describes it quite nicely. Central government would have the role of preparing the waste strategy. Regional councils undertake regulatory activities. Territorial authorities will include waste minimisation and management planning, service delivery and education. Although I note in there that we're asking central government to take an education role as well.
Yes.
So I think that's quite clearly outlines the different roles that the different levels have quite nicely. So I'll open it up for questions. Are there any? Yanni?
Thanks. I guess I'm just interested that it seems like there needs to be much more of a national-led approach given the scale and the size of New Zealand.
Yes. Well, we've requested that in here.
Where's that?
Oh God, it's in here somewhere. I read it. But yes, it's definitely asking the government to take a lead on it. But
there is a very, very much we're seeking, for example, a legislative basis and a strategy so that we can align, so that we can get alignment and comprehensive waste minimisation.
Right, because I think, like, I guess the concern is in the introduction, the 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth paragraph. It kind of talks about the need for local authorities having flexibility and varied circumstances, and I kind of understand that. But it seems to me, if you looked at what's happened in New Zealand, the fact that every council's doing something slightly different is very confusing for the public. It doesn't generate sufficient capacity for resource recovery.
I think we're asking for standardisation led from the national legislation, aren't we?
We're asking for standardisation, and I wish it would be helpful here to have the resource recovery Ross here to answer. But basically what we're asking for, as I understand it, is that we want standardisation in the materials collected,
Right.
but not in the way
Okay.
it's done. Because, you've got to remember that local authorities have different geography, different distributions of population.
Yeah.
So certainly if we're just talking about residential waste, which is one of the key aspects of waste management that councils deal with, we're saying, yes, we want the same types of waste and recycling recovery, but we want to be able to have flexibility in the way that we do it.
Right. Okay. And then I guess the other concern, I couldn't see the container deposit stuff. Is it in here or?
It's probably not.
No, I guess that is maybe one that will, if there is container deposit, that will be led from, of course, central government very much.
Right.
So.
I just guess it was really interesting listening to the glass recycling debate and like the impact that the container deposit scheme has on resource recovery could be quite dramatic, because it would alter the feasibility of larger scale interventions locally. So I wonder if we need to mention it. But I think it's a really good submission. It obviously goes through a lot of detail. The other thing I think we should be really, and I know you've kind of touched on it in the comments, but I think it would be good to have it in the introduction, would be we should actually be really strong in saying to government that the Resource Management Act and national policy statements and national environmental standards really do need to be put in place around these types of activities to ensure that the harm to the community is regulated. Because clearly what we've seen is that often these private companies don't have any responsibility, and it's very hard to get any action, and we've seen that classic case with Living Earth over a very long time, but there's also other examples where companies have, stockpiled waste, not disposed of it adequately.
No, that's all mentioned in here. Yeah.
It is.
I was just saying in the introduction, so
you want it moved into the.
Well, I just think it should be a really significant, it should be something we just draw out in the commentary at the start to say, we think there is there does need to be more caution around what's permitted and how it's permitted, and especially the impact on communities around enforcement and monitoring, so that communities aren't left to
Okay, so
deal
you
with the
just
harm.
want it highlighted in the introduction. It is in the report.
I mean, it is
But
mentioned in the thing. But.
Certainly we, for example, one of the strong themes of the submission is that that we want to see clear systems change.
Yes. Yeah.
And that we seek licensing for all waste services. So, so that would include collection and storage, as well as the more, landfills and recovery services. So I
what
think that's
Yanni's
quite
asking
clear.
for is that can it be highlighted in the
Yes,
introduction?
we can bring it forward from the specific into the general.
Well, but just leave it in both.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what I meant is because what's in the introduction is actually in the
That's
detail
right,
as
that's right.
well.
So
But
bring-
we can bring the
Yeah.
ones certainly into the front as well. There's no
Yeah.
difficulty.
Okay,
that.
so, and I've just got a quick question on, I don't know if you can answer it, Ruth, just for clarity, it's on page 82 and it's number 33. And the question is there a need to strengthen and make better use of import and export controls to support waste minimisation and circular economy goals? For example, should we look at ways to prohibit exports of materials like low-value plastics? And is that talking about our export recyclable stuff, or do you know what that's talking about? Do you?
No, I really don't. I think.
Well, it's not a biggie, that's fine, if we could just get a memo and reply, 'cause I was
Yes,
just curious
yes,
what
I
that
will
means.
get that's something I can't help with.
Yeah. Okay, no, thank you, this is excellent. Everyone else happy with it? Do you have a question, or do you want to move it?
Oh, just a question around a lot of the language. And whilst I agree that we need to reduce waste, there's often unintended consequences, of course. And when you look through this, it appears that a lot of what we'll be doing is more legislation and enforcement of that. So not necessarily creating less waste, but creating a money go round of a whole lot of people that will direct what happens with waste and so on and so forth. A bit like the container return scheme, which until we see how well it stacks up, we don't know if it stacks up. This looks like it's encouraging more of that rather than looking at just actually dealing with waste and having a lot less of it.
No, I don't.
I would have to say
Well, I can
that
find about 8 times it being said if you want me to read them all out. But
Just read one out anyway. The circular economy doesn't necessarily mean more money, costing more money. It means actually the contrary.
well, okay. Right, hang on.
So is it a wording change that you're wanting, Aaron?
Well, no, it's not. It's not a wording change. It's just the actual direction of what we're doing. So under where you start with 5.4. However, we consider the current investment approach even a much more substantial fund will not achieve the significant transformation needed to move. We advocate that both new agency and new, more effective regulatory tools are required to achieve the desired transformation in a way our society manages waste. That there is saying more tools and more regulation to get to, which means spending a lot of money to still achieve the same thing. Or does it not?
But that's just one part of it.
Oh, so we don't support those. Okay, if that's
Just read out a bit that said we think that tools will be
No.
more effective than money.
Okay, so
but tools aren't free, Sarah, in the real
but
world.
it is just one part of it, and the legislation is one tool.
Yeah.
You know, and the increased levy will be another one, and it's all sorts
Sorry, I
of tools.
can't hear you over Huffy next to me.
It wasn't me.
Okay, so I think we've overruled that comment to adjust the report. I'm happy to move this.
Come on, that's
Sarah,
inappropriate.
seconded.
Sexist.
Is there any further discussion,
Right,
any
Liz?
debate on this?
Those kind of comments aren't really helpful.
All right, I'll put the motion. Jimmy,
Which moving?
yes.
I think that's very, very important. I remember back to the August last year, the Jack, Melody, and me, we particularly in the hearing panel, we developed and established this 2020 waste management and minimization plan. Actually, that kind of is a strategic direction, particular vision. Vision actually is leading this direction. That we are all aware this the waste management minimization plan. We focus on this city, is a sustainable city, and we focus on moving forward the zero the waste and the circular economy. But if we review all the submission, we particularly emphasize we need to take this is a collaborative approach. It's rather than council can do it and make it happen, unless central government and also the community, individual, business, all working together. In this approach, we can make it happen. But regarding central government, most important is to establish, to develop those the Otherwise, it's very, very difficult. So the other one is we need to to particular focus on the continued improvement, particularly this kind of 30 years we mentioned this linear one, possibly very difficult. This kind of the curve, rather than to the linear this one. So we focus on those support those six principles. I think prioritize we can make that happen. So that's very important. So that's why I fully support this one.
Thanks, Jimmy. Look, well said, and I think it's important to point out the urgency of this, which we have done, and the fact that we need the legislative changes so that they can replace the Litter Act of 1979 and the Waste Minimisation Act of 2008, and we need to step up our game. I mean, they're talking 2050, but that's a long time. I don't know if anyone saw the news last night and the state of Wellington streets with their rubbish not being removed at the moment, but it shows you the level of waste that we're still producing. It's just way too high. So we need, and in our submission we've requested that, and I think the Mayoral Forum has too, that they create a new government agency to address these issues and to develop the waste strategy and to review it. And I think we need that. That's where government sits. So I think this is an excellent submission. So if there's no other debate, I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks for stepping in, Ruth. Good job. So item 14. So item 14